what I've been previously doing in the Revelation is going, verse by verse, or even slower than that. And what I'm going to do for at least this outline, as we introduce this topic, is I'm going to be doing just a couple of verses in several chapters in the next section to just kind of identify what these images relate to, so that you can get an idea when you read through the chapters what's being talked about. So what I want to do is I want to identify the beast from the sea, the beast from the land, the whore of Babylon, who's also called Babylon the Great, and also, just as we're doing that, we'll talk about the New Jerusalem, the bride of Christ. So these are the four main characters that we're introduced to in this section. And we've already been introduced to the devil. He was just introduced in chapter 12. So the great enemies of the church are going to be the devil, the beast from the sea, the beast from the land, and then we're going to talk about the whore of Babylon and Babylon the Great, who that is. So I wanted to just kind of give that overview because it will be helpful. So let's read Revelation 13, 1 through 10. And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads with 10 crowns on his head. And on each head he had a blasphemous name. So at this point, I just want to point out he looks like the dragon. The dragon from chapter 12. Let's see, it's going to be verse 3. Then another sign appeared in heaven, an enormous red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his heads. The beast, again, verse 1, 10 horns, 7 heads with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. To describe similar, he's got a kind of a family resemblance to the devil here, and that, of course, you associate him immediately with a demonic power. Verse 2, the beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. Okay, so the power, throne, and great authority of the beast comes from the dragon, who's the devil. In verse 2, at the beginning, he's described the beast is, we'll look at this later in more detail, but this is from Daniel's vision of the 4 empires. These are the 4 empires. Verse 3, one of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was astonished and followed the beast. Men worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can make war against him? This is all parody of the work of God. We have an apparent death and a resurrection here. He's had a fatal wound and he's come back to life and everybody's astonished. And who's like the beast? And praise to the beast who can make war against him. It's just a parody, mockery. That's the point. The devil is mocking. 5, the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise his authority for 42 months. He opened his mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. He was given power to make war against the saints and to conquer them. And he was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the book of life, belonging to the Lamb that was slain from the creation of the world. He who has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity he will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword he will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. So the whole point of describing the beast and the coming persecution is that the saints need endurance and faithfulness because they're going into this difficult time. I've noticed that we handle difficult times much better if we know that we're going into them. When the doctor says, I'm going to give you this shot, you're going to probably have a side effect. You might have a fever, this and that, right? It might be bad for a day or two, but you'll be okay in the end. We can totally deal with that.
If you persevere.
Yeah, we just go, okay, this was to be expected. This is nothing out of the normal. I'm just going to, write it out. And go ahead, Don.
I didn't want to interrupt you in the middle of a thought.
Well, everybody knew how it was going to end.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And verse 4, who is being mocked in your understanding?
Yeah, God is being mocked. I mean, it's presented as a mockery of God in the work of Christ. And so
even though he knows the answer.
Yeah. So just to finish up the thought, even though everybody knew the answer, if you weren't told by the doctor that you might have a fever of 103 or something, or feel really tired or something for the next couple of days, you might be really alarmed, as if something strange was happening to you. And so um,
Very true.
Don took us to Peter. Peter says in chapter 5, he says, you know, he goes, I don't want you to be alarmed about the fiery trial that you're facing as if something strange is happening to you. He's like, you were told this was going to happen. And so the church is being told again in a graphic picture, this is going to happen. And this is right after the vision where the dragon's thrown to the earth and goes off to make war on the offspring. And now here he is. He's empowered the beast from the sea to attack the church and to overpower them, to overcome them. And some of you will be sent into captivity and some of you will be killed. That's what that quote means. And so you need to patiently endure faithfully. So that's the point. Now, and then there's another beast. We'll read the rest of this chapter, and then we'll talk about who these beasts are. Verse 11. Then I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. He's coming up out of the earth, not the sea. The sea is generally associated with Gentile powers and chaotic forces, things like that in the Bible. And the land is associated with Israel. Land is generally associated with Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth or the land. He had 2 horns like a lamb, but he spoke like a dragon. And he doesn't look at all like the other beast. He exercised all the authority of the first beast on his behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast whose fatal wound had been healed. So this 12 says that the second beast that went out of the land on behalf of the first beast exercises authority and causes the whole world to worship the first beast. So there's a cooperative relationship here between them where the first beast out of the sea is getting his power from Satan and the beast out of the earth is getting his power from the first beast. So then he acts on behalf of the first beast and he turns people religiously toward the first beast. That's what worship is.
Puts me to mind of the apostle, John the Baptist and Jesus. Not that John the Baptist had power, but in a similar way, he directed people to Jesus as the authority.
As the coming one, as the authority, and he had authority from God to do that, right? And Jesus gets his authority from God, right? So there is a parallel in this structure of those things. Verse 13, and he performed great miraculous signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to earth in full view of men. Because of the signs he was given power to do on behalf of the first beast, he deceived the inhabitants of the earth or the land. He ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. He was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast so that it could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. He also forced everyone, small and great, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on his right hand or on his forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number of the beast, for it is a man's number. His number is 666. Okay, so we learned something more about the beast here. The beast has a number, 666. It's a man's number, 666, and it can be calculated. It can be figured out. That's what it says there. This calls for wisdom. If anyone has insight, let him calculate the number. It can be figured out. So we have that about the beast. We also know that the beast from the sea, we're talking about the beast from the sea, has this number, the man's number. And the beasts from the land are in some kind of cooperative arrangement, but that the beast from the sea is the powerful partner here. And the other one is subordinate, but points people to the beast of the sea. And again, we're talking about in a religious covenantal context, it's not a political thing. So who are these guys? Well, we learn a bit more about the beast if we go to Revelation 17. We'll go there, look at that.
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I noticed verse 11, and one translation says, and I saw another beast that ascended from the ground, and it had 2 horns and was like the lamb. And the words the and lamb are capitalized.
Yeah. Well, it's right. It's another parody, right? Even if you don't capitalize it, I think you pick that up, right? When you just read it without the capitalization, that this beast is a parody of the lamb. This beast is having something to do with Messiah, messianic expectations, messianic hope. and that it's continuing the parody that we've already seen of the work of God. And the big picture, one of the big things it teaches here is that the work of Satan is always derivative. It's nothing original. He just perverts things, makes fun of things.
Buys from something else.
Yeah. So the Revelation 17, this is about the third picture, the whore of Babylon, or Babylon the Great. I'll read the whole chapter. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. There I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. Okay, we met this beast. We know who this is. Beast of the land. I'm sorry, beast of the sea. Beast of the sea. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand, filled with abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come." This is almost from chapter 13. It's almost a quote here. This calls for mind with wisdom. Here's the explanation. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. Okay, this would be impossible, totally impossible for anybody in the first century to think of anything but Rome. City of 7 hills. Totally impossible.
As it was known, right?
As it was known. We have ancient travel guides describing Rome, and they call it the world-renowned city of 7 hills.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the 7 hills? It's Rome. It's Rome. And so there are also 7 kings. Okay, well, those would be the Roman leaders, the emperors, the Caesars. 5 have fallen. That'd be the 6th one. The other one has not yet come, but when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings. So we get a little more detail here. 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority as kings along with the beast. Okay, quick explanation here. There are different interpretations of the 10 kings, but generally they all have this in common, that the 10 kings are not, they're not part of these. We talked about 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other is not yet come. And then there's 10 kings, different line of kings. So the 10 kings are subordinate kings. If we're talking about first century Roman Empire, they're like provincial rulers, because Rome was made up of parts of all conquered, they conquered all kinds of countries, and they put people in charge in these. And historically what happens is Rome is destroyed by 2 things. There's the barbarians that come in around 410, but Rome is already falling apart, and there's civil war within the Roman Empire where all these kings start fighting against each other to destroy it, basically to take over the empire. But they're given authority with the beast. And verse 13, they have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them, because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. So the kings of the provinces will attack the Lamb. Then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw where the prostitute sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute, and they will bring her to ruin and leave her naked, and they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." So the woman sitting on the beast is Rome. The woman sitting on the beast is called the great city that rules over the kings of the earth. Now, many people have thought, well, that's Rome. Rome's the great city. So we have, but the passage clearly distinguishes the two.
Yeah.
The beast turns and destroys, devours the woman in this passage, right? It says, 16, the beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked, and they will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. So they're not the same. So we need to know one more thing about the whore of Babylon, the woman, and that is,
Sorry.
that's okay. Let's look at 17. Let me just look at. So 17:6, we saw this. I saw the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. So the woman is a persecutor of the saints and a killer of the saints. If we look at chapter 18, verse 21, 18:16 to the end. Woe, woe, O great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In 1 hour, such great wealth has been brought to ruin. This is this description of what the city is dressed in is the same description we saw earlier. Then we go on, every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors, and all who earn their living from the sea will stand far off. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, was there ever a city like this great city? They will throw dust on their heads and with weeping and mourning cry out, woe, woe, O great city, where all who had the ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she has been brought to ruin. Rejoice over her, O heaven. Rejoice, saints and apostles and prophets. God has judged her for the way she treated you. So this city is being judged for the way it treated the saints and the prophets. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea and said, with such violence, the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. The music of harpists and musicians, flute players and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No workman of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's great men. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of the prophets and of the saints and of all who have been killed on the earth. Rome never killed a prophet. Rome never killed a prophet. This is the way Jesus describes Jerusalem. So, and then verse 6, chapter 16:16. I'm sorry, wrong verse. 16:6. Revelation 16:6. This is the bowls of God's wrath. The third angel, verse 4, the third angel poured out his bowl on the rivers and springs of water, and they became blood. Then I heard the angel in charge of the water say, you are just in these judgments, you who are and who were the Holy One, because you have so judged. For they have shed the blood of your saints and prophets, and you have given them blood to drink as they deserve. Babylon the Great, the whore of Babylon is Jerusalem. By extension, it's the religious leaders, it's the people of Jerusalem, it's the apostate people of Israel who reject, kill the Messiah, chase down, track down his apostles, kill them, hound the church, persecute the church. That's the whore of Babylon. Religiously, the people of Jerusalem, the religious leaders of the Jewish people, are in league with Rome. This is the alliance. This is the beast from the sea who's dressed in priestly garments, and we'll look at those next Thursday. The garments she has, those are priestly garments that she's wearing. They're in alliance with Rome to persecute the Christians. We'll look at maybe a couple of verses, and then we got like 6 minutes. We'll look at John 19:6-15. As soon as the chief priests and their officials saw him, they shouted, crucify, crucify. But Pilate answered, you take him and crucify him. As for me, I find no basis for a charge against him. The Jews insisted, we have a law, and according to that law, he must die, because he claimed to be the Son of God. When Pilate heard this, he was even more afraid, and he went back inside the palace. Where do you come from? He asked Jesus. But Jesus gave him no answer. Do you refuse to speak to me? Pilate said. Don't you realize I have power either to free you or to crucify you? Jesus answered, you would have no power over me if it were not given to you from above. Therefore, the one who handed me over to you is guilty of greater sin. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, if you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar. Anyone who claims to be a king opposes Caesar. When Pilate heard this, he brought Jesus out and sat down on the judge's seat at a place known as the Stone Pavement, which in Aramaic is Gabbatha. It was the day of preparation of Passover week, about the 6th hour. Here is your king, Pilate said to the Jews. But they shouted, take him away, crucify him. Shall I crucify your king? Pilate asked. We have no king but Caesar, the chief priests answered. Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. Wow. Wow. We submit to Caesar. He's our king. This is the religious leaders.
Yeah.
This is awful. It's really bad stuff. Let's look at Acts 17:7.
Well, I think they were they were, I don't think they really felt that way. They just wanted to use that as an excuse to scare Pilate into handing Jesus over. We're going to tell your boss on you if you don't do this.
Yeah, whether or not they fully believed it, it is historically true that the priesthood of Israel and the Jewish religious leaders eventually joined with Rome in denounced Christians to Rome. Historically, what happens is Jews were persecuting the church, and the church was meeting in the synagogues. This is before 70 AD, the meeting in the synagogues of the temple. Church is meeting there. And this is the problem that the writer of the Hebrews addresses. There's Jewish persecution rising against the church. They're being thrown out of synagogues and things like that. But the Romans were like, that's just a squabble among there's two Jewish sects, two Jewish groups, kind of squabbling it out, and it's not a big deal. And Rome had given protection to the Jewish religion. Rome would recognize some religions if it was necessary to do so to keep the peace. And they learned with the Jews, if they tried to get them to stop their religion, stop their temple services and synagogues and all that the Jews would revolt. So they had made it legal many, many years before for the Jews to continue worshiping. But there were also illegal religions, and the illegal religions were the ones that caused problems for Rome. So if you could stamp that religion out and get rid of the problem, then that was an illegal religion. But if it was more of a problem to try to stamp it out, then it was a legal religion. So what happened was the Jewish leaders started appealing to the Roman courts all the way up to Caesar and saying, these guys are not Jews. These guys are not Jews. We're persecuting them. You should persecute them because they're not Jews. They're causing trouble in the empire. How can Caesar rule an empire that's divided? That kind of thing. And so historically, then what happens is there's this kind of alliance of power from the Roman authority comes down to the Jewish synagogue, where now people are allowed to go out and persecute, and the Romans will actually persecute the Christians as well. So there's
seems to be, in my mind, some question as to whether or not the Christians were really a problem to Rome, as opposed to simply being a problem to the Jewish leaders.
Yeah, I don't think they were a big problem to Rome. I don't think they were.
I mean, I don't know how they could be.
Yeah. So here's Acts 17, verse 5. So Paul and Silas had been speaking about Christ, and some of the Jews were persuaded in verse 4 and joined Paul and Silas, as did a large number of God-fearing Greeks and not a few prominent women. But the Jews were jealous, so they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started a riot in the city. They rushed to Jason's house in search of Paul and Silas in order to bring them out to the crowd. But when they did not find them, they dragged Jason out and some of the brothers before the city officials, shouting, "These men who have caused trouble all over the world have now come here, and Jason has welcomed them into his house. They are all defying Caesar's decrees, saying that there is another king, one called Jesus." Yeah, this is the same thing they said about Jesus, right? So the Jews are, at the very least, using the Roman power. They're using the rhetoric of, we are loyal to Caesar, to get the Roman power to attack the Christians, to do something against the Christians. Whether the Jews actually believe in their heart, whether we're Caesar's servants type of, we're pro-state type of belief is not actually that relevant, because what they're doing is using the Roman power, and they're getting the Roman power to attack the church. And this is a great sin. This is a great sin. And so we see cooperation between. So what you have then is this mighty beast, the Roman power, who's not paying any attention to the Christians. And the Jews keep poking it and say, hey, these guys are a problem. They don't like Caesar. Political treason. So, and you see that throughout the book of Acts, and you see it also in some of the Gospels. And we'll look at a couple more verses Thursday. But so what we've identified so far, at least not fully because we haven't looked at all the passages, but just in a temporary or a tentative way, the Whore of Babylon is Jerusalem, the Jewish people, the great city, the representative of the Jewish people. That's where all the prophets and saints were killed. That's the consistent. That is very that is pretty absolutely sure. You know, it says this is the city where all the prophets and the saints were killed. That's what Jesus says about the city, and we'll look at his words. So we've got Babylon the Great, or the Whore of Babylon, which is Jerusalem, and then representative of the apostate Jewish people. We have the beast from the sea, who is generically the Roman power. It is the city on the seven hills. It is the seven kings. It is all of that. And we have the beast from the land, which we haven't talked about yet, but the beast from the land receives power from the Roman authority and points people toward the Roman authority. And this is what the Jewish leaders do over and over. So what we have is the first century situation being described in big pictures. And so we're going to look more in detail on Thursday. We'll look at some more passages, kind of flesh this out. But if we get the identities set in our head, then it's a lot easier to read through the vision and see what's going on.
Much easier.
Much easier. So I thought, instead of going verse by verse, it'd be much easier just to kind of do this overview of the main characters. And there's specific questions that come up as we go through it verse by verse. And obviously there's different ways people have interpreted these things. Again, I'm sticking to a first century context still because I haven't seen a reason not to yet. And because, as we discussed earlier regarding time texts, the 10 times in the Revelation where it says things are soon near at hand, that's a controlling, those are controlling texts for me. I look at that and say, okay, so they're soon near at hand to the first century audience. The fact that it's a letter written to people and they're meant to understand it means to me that these visions were for them, and that they're the ones being given encouragement and strength, and they're for us in a secondary way. And if we were to say that this kind of stuff still goes on, the church is persecuted and we're called to faithfully endure, those are all true. But as a message to the first century church, these have particular references. So anyway, that's where we are. Too bad we don't have another hour right now, because we could finish this up, but we'll finish it on Thursday.
And we're just getting warmed up.
Just getting warmed up. Yeah.
Very helpful.
Yes.
Today. Very.
Oh, good. Yeah. Knowing the players is great. Makes the reading so much easier. All right. Any
I
final?
like some of these translations that I found that instead of using the word prostitute, it uses the word harlot.
Harlot.
I like harlot better. It seems it's not so sharp.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm not sure, but I believe the King James uses whore, which is how I learned it. And so I was just put in the word whore there, which is the most debased term of the three.
Yes.
And,
yeah. Actually, that's what I meant, was instead of whore, they use
harlot.
Harlot. Yeah.
Yeah, that almost sounds, I don't know. Yeah. Mistress almost. So it's.
Yeah. I've recently started reading using the Peshitta Holy Bible.
Okay.
And I've also looked at the Lexham English Bible.
Yeah.
It's this is just amazing. It's just great that we have access to so many translations in one place.
It is. All right. Well, it's time for us to end. Do any of you have anything you would like to add?
We'll pick up continuing in the Book of Acts.
Yes. Thank you. And I'll rely on you to tell me where we are, because I kind of jumped all over the place. All right.